They can determine how patients' behaviors are linked to health. There is, in the health chapter, is biopsychosocial model of health. It deals with biology and the mental states and so forth, in the interaction and the social emotional aspects, and sort of a systems view of behavior and health. And then also learn about what motivates patients to seek out medical care or not, or they might seek out medical care, but then they don't adhere to the doctor's advice, right? None of you have ever done that, hopefully. But I know folks do that all the time. They go to the doctor tells them something, and they blow it off. Maybe go to another doctor, or they just don't go to a doctor again and do their own diagnosing and so forth. Lawyers, politicians, advertisers. You think these folks need to know something about psychology? You'll find a lot of lawyers that actually have PhDs in psychology and their JDs as well. And it's very beneficial. How would a lawyer benefit from understanding principles of psychology?
Lots of ways.
Anybody pre-law? No pre-law. Couple of you? What kind of law do you want to go into? Oh, okay. A defense lawyer, criminal defense. Okay. And you, sir?
Corporate.
Corporate law? Okay. First chance you get, if they ever have an open house at law schools, go and visit, find out what it's like. Because law school is going to eat your lunch. I know, because I went, okay? And it's very, very stressful, but psychology and law go hand in hand. How could it benefit a lawyer? Yes, sir.
Determine the motives of
Maybe they might could tell if the person's lying or not. Okay, what else? How about jury selection? Would you want to know something about psychology as a lawyer? Wouldn't you want to kind of stack the deck as far as picking jurists and coming up with the questions that perhaps the answers will give you a clue as to whether this person might be favorable or disfavorable towards your position, things like that. How about politicians? They need to know something. There's a lot of politicians that don't seem to indicate that they understand psychology sometimes, because they can do some dumb things, right? And next thing you know, their career's over, right? They still get their retirement. They've got that all packed in. They still get about $150,000 a year. So maybe they didn't really care. Okay. And advertisers. How can a knowledge of psychology benefit us in advertising? Anybody heading towards such a profession? Media? Nobody? Gee, what are y'all's majors? Guess I need to go on Banner and look at what your majors are. What's some of the majors that are represented here? Family studies, education, nursing, general studies. You just kind of searching and hunting and pecking and waiting for something to leap out and grab you. Okay. What else? Hey, that's a good one for this class. Yeah. What else?
Electrical engineering.
Electrical engineering. Now, what would possibly an electrical engineer do with psychology?
Good question.
Are you going to be electrical engineering over there in the corner all by yourself? Or are you going to be probably working for somebody and other workers and managers and maybe somebody summer interns, and you're going to be interacting.
Yeah, just have to work with people.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Okay. Unless you're planning on going living on an island somewhere. Well, even then, you might want to know something about psychology. Remember Castaway? He created Wilson, right? Yeah. Okay. Opportunities for people with graduate degrees expected to grow 15% between now and 2016. I don't know, this statement was probably made before the economy tanked. So I don't know still how accurate that is. Here's right now, most, say 36% are clinical, 10% counseling, school psychology is about 3%, developmental 6%, educational 3%, social and personality 8%, IO 3%, research 16%, other subfields 15%. But here's your large portion. No wonder everybody when they hear. Actually, if you're going to be a psychologist, that's really the ones that are going to be the true psychologists, because they go and get their PhD, and then they go and get their professional licensing, and then they are the true legal psychologists. Now, in industrial organizational, you say, like, I can't have a master's, and in certain states, you can be licensed as an IO psychologist at the master's level. And by nature, we're all intuitive psychological scientists. We develop hypotheses about and try to predict others' behavior. We're social by nature. It's built into our genes. You can't get away from it. And we socially interact all the time. And we're always, especially those that deal with closely. Or, I don't know, it could be you might go to a store to return something. And depending on how they act, you go away scratching your head going, I wonder why they treated me that way, or if you've ever had a bad experience in customer service. Kind of an oxymoron almost, didn't it? Oh, I like, that was a cute cartoon. Here he's trying to be a psychologist, right? He's telling a little mouse, for God's sake, why is it being, think, why is it being so nice to you? Okay? Critical thinking in psychological science requires critical thinking. That's a systematic way of evaluating information to reach reasonable conclusions. It's purposeful, reasoned, and goal-directed. We don't just do research and hope we find something. Okay, there's a purpose and goal and so forth in all of research. And the critical thinking is used in solving problems, formulating inferences, calculating likelihoods, making decisions, and what is a good quality for everybody, no matter what your major, no matter what your profession, is amiable skepticism. What is amiable skepticism? Yes.
It's when there's not really definite facts that you come try to
Well, what does it mean to be amiable? Yeah, cooperative, and then skepticism. What does skepticism mean? If you're skeptical about something, what does it mean?
You have doubts.
You withhold judgment or conclusion until such a time as what? You evaluate it. Maybe you need some more information. Things like that. Now, if we were to talk about the upcoming election and whether we wanted to re-elect President Obama or not, would it be a nice, friendly, amiable discussion, or would it turn into a food fight? Yeah, I mean, think about it. when you talk politics or religion or something along those lines, we don't really exercise this amiable skepticism. In other words, you agree to disagree or something like that. You talk about it reasonably, and you say, you know what? I'm going to withhold conclusion here until I get some more facts, or I mull through it some more, things like that. Now, there's a difference between skepticism and cynicism. What is cynicism? You run into cynicism all the time. If we're cynical, we're what? We're disbelieving, right? But we don't necessarily offer any reason why. We just go, I don't believe it, that's it. I'm cynical about everything. I don't believe anything any of you say. Okay? That's being cynical. That's not skeptical. Being skeptical is a good position to have in all areas of your life. Don't jump to conclusions yet. Think about it some more, get some more information and things like that. So here's a way to look at critical thinking. Clarity, accuracy, relevance, logicalness, breadth, precision, significance, completeness, fairness, depth must be applied to purposes, questions, points of view, information, inferences, concepts, implications, assumptions, as we learn to develop intellectual traits of intellectual humility, intellectual autonomy, intellectual integrity, intellectual courage, intellectual perseverance, confidence in reason, intellectual empathy, and fair-mindedness. This is something that would be good for all of us to strive for. Unfortunately, we don't usually do that. And that's why I brought up, say, like something volatile, a volatile subject, politics, religion, and things like that. We sort of abandon these type of concepts and go, because it usually switches from a logical point to a what? Emotional point. Okay. Any of you be at a store and checking out and see anything like that? Surely you have. Checking out at Walmart or something, and right there, they stick these things right by the register so you'll see them, and people will grab and go, oh, 100 second predictions will come true next year, right? Man, grab it and run. Okay? Is that critical thinking? No. So you'll find even very non or uncritical thinking in print and available for sale. Okay? And that we were much, much more critical thinkers and we wouldn't fall prey for this type of stuff. Psychologists have to adhere to a code of ethics, and members of the APA, which they just sent me a renewal, just yesterday I got it. To be a member, there's a code that we need to be respectful to all people, treat them with dignity, protect them from potential harm, and then we have to try to avoid ethical dilemmas in doing psychological research, not just research, but also you as a therapist or a counselor or something like this, or certain guidelines. What would be an ethical dilemma that you want to avoid, say, as a clinical psychologist? Some ethical dilemma. Clinical psychologist or counselor. What ethical dilemmas would be one that you would probably want to avoid? Now, the nap zone doesn't occur until about between 2 and 3. We're safely way earlier than that, okay? So you can't blame it for the circadian rhythm on your lack of responses. Yes?
Relationships with your patients.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You're doing therapy with someone of the opposite sex, or same sex, I guess, but usually opposite sex, and you want to avoid any improprieties or anything like that. And in fact, to stay within the guidelines, you can't have a relationship with a former patient or something like that for at least 2 years. Okay? And so there's certain ethics and guidelines that you as a psychologist, yes?
Like a patient's privacy, like talking about like their problems and stuff to everybody. That would be an ethical.
You mean for the
Like a psychologist
The-
to go around and tell everybody.
Oh yeah, confidentiality, absolutely. Yeah, you don't go around and saying, "Man, I saw someone." You wouldn't believe what someone, and all. Yeah. And let me tell you, when you go, well, I don't want to say when you go. Oh, that brings up another point. I'm glad I thought about that. Don't ever feel like that you're above needing some help at some point in time. It's not a shame or anything like that to go seek some counseling or something like that. The psychology clinic operates on the second floor of the social sciences building. It's staffed by graduate students and it's overseen by PhD level psychologists. And it's free. And it could be something like you're just stressed. School and work and family issues and things like that. I'm just overwhelmed. And so you go and you can get free help there in the clinic. And when I worked on my master's degree, I worked at the clinic and think, man, I tell you what, I needed about $75 an hour for doing that. But when I came out of there, I was worn out. And it's really, you have to have a love and a passion to do that thing, because you really are, you're dealing with someone, it pulls your emotions in, but you've got to, stay mental about it, logical and things like that. And but it's a very difficult profession. And the insights of psychology are critical in almost every sphere of our lives and its content, and explicating how humans think, feel, and behave. It's universal. And so I love it that there's so many different types of majors and disciplines and so forth that do take psychology, even though you're not a psychology major. Hopefully you'll walk out of here with a rudimentary understanding of the different aspects of psychology. How many of you, when you signed up for this class, you just really didn't know what you were getting into? Yeah. And did you think maybe that all we were going to do is talk about disorders? Yeah. Yeah, because I don't know if I mentioned it before, but I first took my first psychology class in 1976, Dr. Merritt, and it was his first semester here. He since became the department head and then has retired. That's how long ago it was, okay? And I took that class. I was really kind of apprehensive about taking it because I was afraid I was going to find out that there was something wrong with me. And I had no idea really what psychology was about. And the part about disorders, if you'll notice in your text, that's towards the last of the text. And we're going to cover the whole, well, almost the whole width and breadth of psychology, which disorders is, a small part, really, of what psychology deals with and what it's about. Okay, that's chapter 1. Chapter 2, research methodology. We're going to talk about what is scientific inquiry, what are the types of studies in psychological research, what are the data collection methods, and then how are data analyzed and evaluated. So know the difference between theories, hypotheses, and research. And, we talked about some of this the other day, and the gentleman that was here in the front, not here, but we did go into it some. So here's where we're going to start. We've got to start somewhere. And so we're going to start with formulating a testable hypothesis. And it must be operationally defined. Okay? The scientific method depends on theories, hypotheses, and research. And even though you might be starting here with a particular direction, sometimes you might end up with unexpected findings. And they can be very beneficial. And when asked about this, Louis Pasteur, who knows about or remembers Louis Pasteur? What did Louis Pasteur, what was his gift to us? Not milk, but the process of pasteurization, right? Removing harmful bacteria and whatnot from things such as milk. Okay. And when asked about accidental discoveries, he said, "Did you ever observe to whom the accidents happen? Chance favors only the prepared mind." Okay? And so, yes, sometimes it happens in science, but that scientific-minded person is who it happened to. And they were astute enough to notice it and then veer off in the direction. It's just like when we get to the learning chapter, we're going to look at Ivan Pavlov. And he was a Russian physiologist who was studying the salivation behaviors of dogs and accidentally formulated from some observations classical conditioning. Okay? The 4 goals of psychological science are to describe, that's the what, predict, that's when, control, what causes, and explain why. That's the goals of when we're doing psychological research. And scientific inquiry relies on objective methods and empirical evidence to answer testable questions. Or what is a testable question? What's a testable question? A testable question. What's another term for a testable question? Hypothesis. Yes. A or an hypothesis. Okay. So interconnected ideas or models of behavior, theories, yield testable predictions, hypotheses, which are tested in a systematic way, research, by collecting and evaluating evidence, data. Okay? Now, notice it says it relies on objective methods and empirical evidence. What do we mean by empirical evidence? What is empiricism? We talked about it, right? It's what can be observed through what?
Experimentation.
Well, through the senses. That which can be observed through the senses. Now, there are some phenomena that are outside of the sphere of our senses, and then what technology has allowed us to develop what? Instruments to measure what is beyond our senses. Before we develop certain instruments to measure the light spectrum or sound spectrum, at least according to our understanding, that stuff didn't exist until we could measure it, right? Because it's way beyond our hearing or our sight, things like that. Now, another point, objective methods. Science should be objective. What do we mean by that? Science should be objective.
Cold hard facts.
I'm not sure if I'm following you. What do you mean?
Like it has to.
Anybody else take a stab when we say objective? Yes.
Yeah, like how much interest in
Okay, then that's a good point. Did y'all hear that? He said you shouldn't have what?
Emotional interest.
An emotional interest, right? Because if you do, then what might happen?
I'll be biased.
Yeah. And is it really possible for us to be unemotional? Unless you're Spock, or right? Anyway, right? He was half human, half Vulcan. Then remember, Dad wanted to have emotions and things like that. Objective means
awesome.
that you're going to approach
Star Trek
this
reference.
neutrally. You're not going to try to prove your point. In fact, from a Popperian, Karl Popper's perspective, you want to have testable hypotheses that lend themselves to what? Falsification. Falsification. That's good science. Now, do you think that science is truly always objective? Can you think of some examples where it might not be objective?
Psychology.
Well, give me some type of example where you think the objectiveness is in question. What if you were a research scientist working for a tobacco company? Who's paying your salary? R.J. Reynolds.
Yeah.
And they tasked you to do some research into what are some of the effects of smoking cigarettes, right? And you're going, yikes. Man, what I do here? They're paying my salary. My kids, I'm putting my kids through school, right? Man, if I come up with some bad news, maybe I'm going to skew the results a little bit or something like that.
In our Consumer Watchdog report tonight, ABC's Dan Harris asked some tough questions about a prominent and quite public scientist whose research might have influenced many families, including yours. While study after study has been making a connection between sugary soda and obesity, this one scientist stands out for questioning the link. Dan investigated why.
This is David Allison, a renowned scientist who researches obesity and goes on television to talk about it.
We're looking always at food marketing practices. There were many other factors that quite plausibly could be contributing to the obesity epidemic.
But curiously, even though study after study has shown soda to be a significant contributor to America's staggering obesity crisis, Dr. Allison says there's not enough solid evidence. Why? He says that's because the studies haven't been rigorous enough. But his critics say Allison is motivated by something else, by all the money he has repeatedly taken from Coca-Cola, Pepsi, and the American Beverage Association.
And then his articles can be cited by the companies, can be used to say, look, this article in this major journal concludes we don't know yet if these sugar-sweetened beverages are bad for children's and adults' health.
It's not just soda companies. Allison has also taken money from Kraft, McDonald's, General Mills, Kellogg's, Mars Candy, and Nabisco. Allison was paid by the New York Restaurant Association and wrote an affidavit warning that New York City's law requiring restaurants to post calorie information might actually make people eat more. He was paid by the baby formula companies, and he wrote a paper questioning the World Health Organization's assertion that breastfeeding cuts a child's risk of obesity. Barry Potkin, a food researcher at the University of North Carolina, is now speaking out. He admits that he, too, has taken some industry money for research, but he says, unlike David Allison, he turns down many of Big Food's most tantalizing offers.
I've been offered $5,000 to go speak to this meeting or that meeting. You get $2,000 to $5,000 a day. They'll fly you on business class tickets to exotic places. They'll take you to Paris, to Rio.
Representatives from the food industry, including the American Beverage Association, told us the notion that industry money taints scientific research is baseless. As for David Allison, his employer, the University of Alabama, told us Allison has produced some research that contradicts the interests of his corporate sponsors. We wanted to talk to him about that, but Allison turned down our repeated requests for an interview. So we surprised him. I'm Dan Harris from ABC News. Are you a hired gun for the food industry? Can you answer a question? I'm just looking at this list of money you've taken from the food industry. While Allison did not want to talk to me, he has publicly denied that all the money he takes from the food industry has impacted his science in any way, saying that he is simply on a, quote, pursuit for truth. And George, this is a big issue, and it raises questions about everything we're being told about our food.
That's right, Allison is far from alone.
There are a lot of people doing the same thing. That's the issue.
Okay, Dan, thanks very much.
So, not all science is objective. Now, one good thing, I guess, about that is he does sort of play the devil's advocate. And it causes those that have a viewpoint different than him to make sure that their methodology is on track. And that even though he might be being paid, maybe some of the points that he brings up might be valid, okay? So there's both good and bad. Science is not always, purely objective and so forth. And I like that cartoon. I think that's in your book too. There are lots of theories out there. Notice the proof box is kind of empty, okay? All right, so in order to develop a theory to explain behavior, you must what? A? Anybody else? Different answer? Anybody break from the ranks? B? D? Anybody for C? Let's just get them all. That way it's scattershot, right? Shotgun effect. We'll get them all. It's B. Create a model based on interconnected ideas and observations to develop a theory. All right. Now, two forms of psychological research. There's basic research and there's applied research. Basic research, we're looking at answers for theoretical questions. We try to describe, explain, predict. Remember those goals we talked about? For instance, how is hunger controlled by the brain? Or applied research, we seek answers for specific application problems. Say like an organizational psychologist might study leadership, job satisfaction, job training, and development, and then look at the application of the results and the resultant change in the organization. So basic applied research. And as we mentioned about the unexpected discoveries, your book talks about Thorsten Wiesel and David Hubel were wired up a cat's neuron dealing with vision, and they thought that that particular area of the brain, I think, was going to handle certain type of visual stimuli, and they had the cat, you'll see, is kind of sedated, and he's held up in a like a brace, and the eyes are open, and then they're measuring the neuronal activity. And what the cat was watching, it messed up, and it put a line across the screen. All of a sudden, that neuron lit up. Okay, it just happened by pure accident.
We're looking at a screen as seen by a cat. The sporadic firings from a single brain cell concerned with vision. It lies in the back of the cat's head. The cell sometimes responds to, sometimes ignores the moving bar of light in front of the eyes.
Those
This
clicks
particular cell, picked up by a microelectrode in the surface layers
are
of
the
the brain,
neuron is
reacts to
fine.
a horizontal line in a precise area of the screen. Among the visual cells, there's an amazing division of labor. The animal is under an anesthetic. We're at the Harvard Medical School in Boston. The microelectrode seeks out another cell in the visual region of the brain. At the projector is David Hubel from Canada. Thorsten Wiesel from Sweden marks the screen as he listens to the cell. In 10 years' collaboration here in Boston, Hubel and Wiesel have uncovered the early stages in which the brain picks out features in the patterns of light and shade that fall on the eyes.
And what got them on to that was an accident. Okay, it was all unexpected and so forth. And then that led to a whole decade of research done by these two gentlemen. I'm sorry. They back to the skull of the cat, the occipital region that deals with visual interpretation. They had it hooked up to pick up neuronal activity as that bar got into certain regions, and so you could hear the clicks get faster and then drop off, and so they were marking the regions where that particular area of the brain would be registering visual information at some orientation, how the stimuli was oriented, vertically, horizontally, within a certain area, and things like that. Okay. All right, we're going to look at the types of studies in psychological research. We're going to talk about descriptive studies, correlational designs, and then the true sophisticated type of research and experiment. And then we'll talk about random assignment and the need for random assignment and large sample sizes, things like that. So know the advantages and disadvantages of the different research methods and know why random assignment is important when designing experiments. All right, so we formulate a testable hypothesis. It must be operationally defined, but this, even though I started right there, really a testable hypothesis, you got to go back here when someone's reviewing scientific literature and they're reading about other theories. Okay, so if you backtrack, you see where the testable hypotheses come from theories. All right. Now, a hypothesis is what again?
Prediction.
A testable question, right? And importantly, I'll put must be operationally defined. The variables have to be operationally defined. What does that mean? Operationally defined. Loud? I'm hearing, but I'm not really hearing. Say it loud. No, operationally defined means it has to be provable. And if we were going to do an experiment where we're looking at whether letting students out early on Fridays make them happier, why y'all laughing? I have to define, how do I know that the subjects are happy? Okay, so well, I know, but that's what I'm saying. How would I know that right now I said, okay, let's stop here, let's go home? How would I know you're happy?
Watching us skip out the door.
How fast they got out of the building? What if there was a roach in here and someone saw it and they ran out fast? That might be an alternative explanation. How am I going to know that your folks are happy for getting out early? How am I going to know there's a difference? That's my question. I'm spitting all over the place. Well, you're going to get out at 12:05. That's still, you haven't defined yet, operationally defined happiness yet. How am I going to know that you're happy that you got out early?
We're going to tell you.
So you say by how many thank yous I get?
Yes.
Okay, that might be one way. What else? Smiles? Somebody said smiles? Okay, that might be a good one. Have you ever smiled when you really didn't feel like smiling? Yes, you have. You felt like you know what, and people walk by and go, "Hey, how you doing?" You go, "Oh, I'm fine." Then you go back. Right? Yeah, but smiles might be an outward manifestation Yeah. So you see what I'm talking about here. You have to operationally define these things that you want to measure and observe. Okay, operationally defined. So it might be thank yous or smiles or I don't know, dollar bills thrown in my piece of luggage there or something like that. Okay. All right. Now we're going to design the study and collect the data. And so what kind of designs could we possibly use? There's three main types. There's descriptive, correlational, and experimental. And there's pluses and minuses to all of these three. Now there are some others. It's like quasi-experimental. We're really not going to deal with those. These three main ones, descriptive, correlation, and experimental. Now, descriptive studies, the researchers observe and describe naturally occurring behaviors to provide a systematic and objective analysis. And there's two types of descriptive studies, naturalistic and participant observation. Here, for example, is Jane Goodall observing some either large chimpanzees or small apes in the wild. Now, this researcher is actually participating in a bow fishing scenario here with perhaps a South American native, something like that. Okay, so naturalistic versus participant. Okay, and some advantages of observation is in the early stages when you try to determine whether phenomena exist, you might notice something in observing, and then you can carry it on further, develop some testable hypotheses and things like that based on what you observe. Now, some disadvantages, there's errors in observation because an observer can have some expectations, observer bias, that colors what they observe, okay? And also in participant observation, or this the way she is, the presence can change the behavior or reactivity. So in this instance, what would be better for her to do to avoid reactivity? Be hidden. Be hidden, okay? Well, I'm going to skip that. Longitudinal studies are observation, and this is where, if you notice here, there's a picture when they were young, older, holding a picture when they were older, picture of them when they were older, holding the picture of the picture of the picture. Okay? And keep track of that. And this is some type of study of some folks of question over time. All right? So some advantages, it provides information about the effects of aging and allows us to see developmental changes. Developmental psychologists will use the longitudinal studies. But some disadvantages is that it's expensive, takes a long time, and due to attrition, either death or no longer loss of interest, they don't want to participate anymore. Cross-sectional study is that we will look at individuals of different ages at the same time. It's faster, less expensive, and but we eliminate the cohort effect, but there might be some other like third variable problems that we can account for in looking at folks at the same time of different ages. Okay, so if we were to have something of interest, as say, how interested are folks 60 and above in sex, and how interested are teenagers in sex? Are both groups interested in sex?
Possibly. Yes.
Yeah, just because you're 60, I don't. I'm not 60, but I'm getting close. But their attitudes towards sex might be very different than what could be some possible explanations for the difference in attitudes towards sexual freedom and so forth, sexual expression. What could be some possible explanations between the two groups? Not necessarily age,
When they were raised.
but that could be age, but
When
what?
they were raised, when they grew up.
Say it.
When they were raised.
When they were raised, the cohort effect, the particular time period, the attitudes towards sex when they were growing up versus when this group was growing up could be a possible explanation in the difference between the two groups. Okay? And we have to be concerned in descriptive studies about observer bias. And we'll stop here. We'll pick up here on money.